Joining another episode of Quantum Growth for Financial Advisors. It is your host, Jon Kuttin, joined again by my sidekick, Mr. Joseph Greco. So, Joe, maybe you could say a quick hello to the audience. And I know you had a simple concept, I'll say, that you wanted me to talk a little bit about today. So, looking forward into talking about that.
Yes. Good morning, John. Good morning, audience. Hope everyone is doing well today. We are back with another episode of John's favorite leadership quotes and sayings. We got a lot of great feedback on this episode when we did it a few months ago. So we wanted to wrap it back up and get another episode going here with a few other things that John loves to say, which I think our listeners will get a lot of value from, going a little bit deeper on some of these leadership sayings. So, John, let's get right into it. Something that I always hear you say, right, and I love this term, it really taught me a lot, is the concept of simple, complex, simple, kind of getting over that complexity, that middle of the mountain there. So why don't you just tell our listeners what that means, how you've applied it to your life, and I think how they could get some value out of it.
Yeah, love to, Joe. And yes, I have been a broken record lately, talking a lot about probably three things. And, we've been talking a lot. And I think one of the things that I'd like to do, Joe, and if I say it on the podcast, we now have to do it, is I'd like to do a follow-up podcast talking a little bit about, I'll call it a book review, that Dan Sullivan just came out with, an amazing book, maybe my favorite read yet, which is 10X is Easier Than 2X. So if you haven't read that book yet or listened to it, go get it. We'll do a quick book review on it in one of these sessions, but really, really great book that I think our listeners will love. And kind of changing my thinking, or kind of helping me even connect back to kind of like how I've thought and how we've been able to build a pretty large business in the wealth management industry. But with that being said, when I think about simple, complex, simple, and I think about really learn this concept through Ray Kelly, who's been a repeat offender on our show as well. What Ray says, and what I've learned from him, is, in essence, think about, as a listener, a mountain, right? So just think about a little mountain that, on the bottom left of the mountain, write the word simple. In between the mountain and the hump of the mountain, inside of it, write the word complex. And then in the far bottom right, on the other side of the mountain, if you will, write the word simple. And there's a saying that Ray uses, and the saying is that I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on the near side of complexity, but I would give my right arm for simplicity on the far side of complexity. And what that means, I might have even hit this on a podcast in the past, but really what that means in its quote unquote simplest form is, when you have an idea, or you have a vision, or you have a goal, the bottom left, it's simple, right? It's simple. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to build a $10 million a year wealth management business. I want to get more referrals. I want to build CPA partnerships. I want to do practice acquisitions, whatever it may be. Everything starts with an idea, right? So Dan Sullivan, to quote Dan Sullivan, he's got this great saying, which is, entrepreneurs make stuff up and then make it real, right? That's what really good entrepreneurs do. So it always starts with an idea, and that idea is really simple. Ideas are worth nothing. They're dreams, they're hopes, they're absolutely worth nothing. Inside of that mountain, you've got that simple idea, bottom left. Inside the mountain is all the complexity, right? So when you think about the complexity, if it was losing 20 pounds, which is something a lot of people could relate to, it's the barbecue that you went to, a little while back for Memorial Day, right? It was that delicious smelling cheeseburger, or the delicious chocolate cake, right? All of the complexity. It was having to wake up early to go to the gym. It was choosing, drinking water as opposed to drinking Coca-Cola, or having, one glass of wine instead of having 3 glasses of wine. all of the complexity, right? And it's really hard to get through that is ultimately the struggle, right? The cool thing is if you can get through the complexity, and I want you to again think about this mountain and get to the other side. For those or for the things you've done in your life, you can think about some of those things, a goal you had that was complex, that you battled through, you figured it out, you continue to persevere. When you got to the other side, getting there now seems so simple because you now know everything you had to do. You made the commitment, you made the sacrifice, you did those things. And now on the other side, it's really easy for you to actually teach someone else how to do it, right? Or looking back, the fact that you have now accomplished it, it's now what Ray would call and Doug Lennox would call, two past guests, is profoundly simple, right? So simple is on the bottom left, complexity is in the middle, profound simplicity is on the far right. And that's when you really, really, really understand something. And one of the things, Joe, that I've become really conscious of lately, and I think it's helped me become a better leader, and it's helped my organization and some of the people that I lead really get clearer and be able to become more intentional on achieving their own goals, right? And this all connects back, guys, to leadership. It connects back to the EOS system or whatever system you use of how to actually achieve your goals. But when you get clear on it and you understand what having simplicity on the far side of complexity, that profound simplicity, it makes you become intentional of your thinking, and it makes you start to understand the mindset that you need to have in order to actually achieve anything that you want to achieve. So, Joe, I'm going to pause there and see if there's anything that you'd like me to, kind of delve into a little bit more as it relates to this simple, complex, simple concept. And then I want to talk a little bit more about, something that I call either going an inch wide and a mile deep, or a mile deep and an inch wide. But Joe, any clarification points or anything that you'd want to add to that dialogue that I just went through?
Sure. No, I think you explained it pretty well, John. I actually reminds me, I saw a great quote on my LinkedIn feed this morning, which really resonated with me is, I forget who said it, but basically it said, if what you do is easy, life will be hard, right? So you have to kind of expect, right, that anything that you want to do or any big goal that you want to accomplish is going to be difficult, right? And you have to put in the work, you got to put in the time, you have to have the self-discipline to do it. Again, if what you do is really easy every day, right, and it's not really challenging you, life may be pretty hard in the future, right? Because you're not really pushing yourself to get to that next level, develop yourself, increase your skill set, etc. So I like to think of it like that as well. You got to put in the work. It's going to be hard, but at the end of the day, if you can get over that hump, right, as we know, it can be a pretty rewarding experience, and then you can reap all the benefits. So I love how you explain that.
Yeah, completely agree. And this isn't rocket science. I mean, nothing that I'm saying today is something that our listeners haven't heard. But the way I think about it is sometimes you need to hear things, with a different angle of an axe, right? Which is, how do you chop a tree down? If you just keep doing it the same way or thinking about it the same way, eventually the axe gets stuck.
Right.
And I think what happens, Joe, for a lot of people and entrepreneurs and leaders and advisors, et cetera, is somewhere we have this goal, right? The vision starts simple. And then what most people do, because the goal is just that, it's a want, it's not a need. And that's, part of this whole 10X is easier than 2X concept, which we'll talk about in another podcast, really kind of had a great way of of putting it, which is, most people, if you just really think about it and ask yourself the question right now, they work towards their needs, not their wants, right? You want to lose 20 pounds and you lose 10 and you go, all right, well, that was good enough, right? You're not even conscious that you're saying it, but you're like, people are saying I'm doing it. I look a little bit better. I've lost a couple of pounds. My clothes are a little bit light, a little bit looser. I'm feeling a little bit more confident or have a little bit more energy. So what do? We go back to our old habits, right? And we go back, and 6 months later, we put the 10 pounds back on, because what we do is we work up to our needs, not our wants. And as I've studied more and more successful people, Joe, it's starting to click more for me. What really successful people do is they actually have the perseverance to actually get through the complexity, to not just do what they need, but to do what they want, to build something bigger than they actually need to. And what's interesting is everyone has a different want, right? Some, there are people whose wants are simply to put food on their table, right? I mean, that's a want, and for many people, it's a given. It just happens in your life, right? But for someone, that's a want. For others, a want might be to have a yacht, right? Or it might be to work 3 days a week, or it might be to retire at age 47, or it might be to make $10 million a year, $100 million a year, help 1 million people. So everyone has a different want, but when you become clearer on what it is that makes you tick and what it is that you personally want, that want feels simple, but you got to get through the complexity. And, Ed Milet, who I'm avid listener to and read his book, which was a great book as well, that our listeners should consider, probably do a book review on that one as well, right? Which, what was the name of that book? One More, the power of, what is it? Power of One More, right?
Power of One More, yeah.
Yeah, power of one more. One of the things he says, and he says it a lot on his own podcast, which is that most people are way closer to their goal than they think they are. Yep. And sometimes people give up after they've done, if you think about my mountain again, they might have gone through that complexity, might last 3 years, and they might have been able to persevere through 18 months of it. They did half the work, and then they quit because the want wasn't big enough, right? And therefore they stop halfway through, and they just had to do another 18 months, or maybe it was a month, or maybe it was 2 years. You just don't know. And what very successful people do is they're consciously competent enough for their wants to be able to work through and see it to the other side, where it becomes profoundly simple, which, Joe, brings me to this concept that I've been talking about to death lately. I mean, the reason I've been talking about it to death lately is because I'm very guilty of it myself, and have become aware of some of the mistakes that I'm making as a business owner, right? So sometimes we talk about, you as a financial advisor or a business owner being a plate spinner, right? We've got, there's a cartoon that I've seen that's got, a person that's spinning like literally 15 plates, and they're spinning the plate of, I want to grow my business through marketing. I want to use LinkedIn. I want to do practice acquisitions. I want to work with CPAs. I need a better culture. I need to become a better leader. I need a better asset management process. I need to do more financial planning. I need to raise my pricing, and I need to resegment my clients. All the things that we talk about on this podcast, right? We're spinning too many plates, okay? Right. And what happens when you spin a lot of plates is you don't get really good at any of them, and you can't master any of them and make a big impact. So, we're all aware of this, right? Which is, figure out 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things that are the most important things for you to do right now, right? To drive your business to the next level. And that's where the saying, Joe, going an inch wide and a mile deep, or going a mile deep and an inch wide, ultimately come into play. And what's funny? I'm actually saying that backwards the whole time, and I'm not going to redo my podcast. So it's actually going an inch wide and a mile deep, or it's going an inch deep and a mile wide. So I apologize to my listeners, but I'm not going to say it again. So you can all send me notes telling me I said it wrong the whole time. I'm aware of it. But the difference being, what most of us do is we're generalists, right? We've got these 15 or 20 plates that we're trying to spin, and we only go an inch deep, right, on those things, and we go a mile wide. So we know a little about a lot, right? we spend a little time on a lot of different things. And when I think about going an inch wide and a mile deep, it's like, hey, if I'm going to learn how to work with CPAs, I'm going to become the best there ever was, Joe, working with CPAs. I'm going to read CPA periodicals. I'm going to go through 3 courses on how to work with CPAs. I'm going to find the best book on how to work with CPAs. I am going to interview CPAs. I am going to live, eat, and breathe CPAs. And I'm going to become obsessed with it. Okay. I'm going to become the best in the world, and I'm going to go a mile deep. And the truth is, to our listeners, going a mile deep never ends. It doesn't end at a mile deep. You have to, there's this never ending process of learning that once you go a quarter of a mile deep, you realize that there's all these other things in that thing that you didn't even know about, right? And then all of a sudden you go, ooh, I'm hooked on this, and I'm going to go listen to a podcast about partnering with CPAs, or I'm going to take another course, or I'm going to go to a seminar on it, right? Or I'm going to join a community on it. And what I've learned is most people are generalists. They don't go deep enough. They don't become expert at it. And when you become unbelievably good at anything, in my opinion, from my experience, it's worth way more of how you can create leverage and growth than knowing a lot about a little.
Right.
I'm sorry, knowing a little about a lot. I can't speak this morning, right? Knowing a little about a lot, right? You want to know a lot about a little is the right way to ultimately say that. So I know some of this to our listeners can get a little bit confusing, but I think my goal for today was to do a short little hit on something that, you know, we've been talking incessantly about in our business. And really what we're doing, Joe, as I think about it, is we're going an inch wide and a mile deep on making sure that we go an inch wide and a mile deep, because we've been talking about incessantly, and I've been studying it and learning more about it. And there's an old saying, right, which is when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. So all of a sudden, everything I listen to, everything I read seems to be telling me the same thing, right? Less is more, just do more well, right? And become an expert at those things. And it's usually the basics, right? It's usually not some specialty thing. It usually goes back to blocking and tackling to ultimately reach that goal, and to ultimately find simplicity or profound simplicity on the far side of complexity. So with that, I hope our listeners enjoyed another quick episode of Quantum Growth for Financial Advisors. As we like to say, please share it with a friend, rate the podcast, hopefully favorably. And the more listeners that we have out there, the more people that we can help. So I hope you enjoyed today. And I hope you can begin in your own business to really start to focus on making things simple, profoundly simple, that is on the far side of complexity. So make it a great day. If you yourself or anyone you know could be a good, interesting listener, or should say contributor, I really can't speak today, on our show, please don't keep us a secret. Shoot us a note. Let us know if it's you or someone that you know that could